I love being alone. I love my solitude. It's easier to be alone. People mean pain. Sacre new hell is other people. You can read thousands of these comments here on YouTube. And to be honest, that's insane to hear from social creatures who only could evolve because they survived in groups. But I get it so well, because the world we live in is a fucked up, dangerous and messy place full of people who will give a shit about your feelings and will hurt you. So the suffering is damn real. Still, when I read through those comments, I also sense a lot of desperation and frustration here. Is the only way really total self-isolation and solitude? And today in this video, we will find out why we isolate ourselves in the first place, and we discuss if there are alternatives to avoiding other people entirely and for the rest of your life. This video can be life-changing for you, or you won't agree at all, but definitely let me know in the comments below. And now let's start. Welcome to today's episode. My name is Robert, and today we talk about why we isolate ourselves and why we avoid other people. And this is where I want to start now. People with CPTSD in general love to isolate themselves and have avoidant and anxious attachment tendencies. Many people share their stories about exactly that here on YouTube. And I prepared some comments for you. Someone wrote, I was just diagnosed with CPTSD. I am so hypervigilant that it's crazy. I've been in fight mode for my entire life. That's typically CPTSD here. I've been terribly hurt during my life, and being alone is comforting me. I love being alone. OMG, I finally found the group of people who enjoy isolation as much as I do. We should have a social media group of our own. So those are definitely typical comments of people I reach here quite a lot on YouTube when we research the topic of isolation, of solitude in the scenario of CPTSD or high sensitivity as well. And that's also true for me because I know isolation so well. I used to isolate myself for years. For example, when I was a child, I loved to spend most of my time in my room with a locked door, and I definitely think that many of you can relate to that. When I was in my room, I felt that comfort, I felt safe, I felt like enjoyment, and I just spent there hours playing video games or reading books, for example, doing creative stuff. Also in my previous relationships, I loved the moment when I was alone again, for example, after spending a weekend with my ex-partner. When I entered my flat, my safe space, I was feeling like, oh my gosh, this is so relieving. This feels so safe here. And even today, sometimes I feel a lot of tension when I'm around other people and when I can't be alone. And it is definitely not, and I guess many of you agree out there, that I hate other people. Or how Charles Bukowski said, do you hate people? I don't hate them. I just feel better when they're not around. But why is that? Why do we isolate ourselves in the first place? Now, what's also true is that some people will have a big need for solitude naturally. If you're a highly sensitive person, if you're someone with autistic traits, or you're just an introvert, you may love your time alone. You may really like that, and it comes naturally to you. But there is a big difference between loving to be alone and needing to withdraw because you are just with other people. So, as social creatures, social contact, connection, and intimacy are basic human needs for us. What is it then? Now, some people in the comments, again, give some possible answers and explanations here. For example, someone said, to me, isolating myself is necessary. Isolation means safety to me. And that's so typical for people who experienced probably early in their childhood that it's not safe to be with other people, and it's not safe to be in relationships, for example, with their caregivers. And someone also commented here, it's the PTSD part. When my dad raged, I went to my room and closed the door for safety. I still do it. And I guess, again, many of us can agree with that and can relate with that. So someone else commented, same, my favorite saying of late is, people are dangerous emotionally, and the older I get, the more sensitive to other people I have become. Their moods affect me and I find myself becoming quite overwhelmed. I also find it hard to assume that things aren't my fault, like perhaps my coworker is in the mood because I've done something wrong, and I know that sounds mad. My small home is my sanctuary, but it's also lonely. So it's definitely the childhood trauma part within us. And that part makes us feel at the core that we don't feel safe in the world and around other people. And that makes us isolate in two ways. Number one, emotional isolation. We are with someone but are not fully there. And number two, physical isolation. We withdraw physically, close the door behind us, and so we are alone. And I want to give you now 6 reasons why we have this feeling of a wall within us that protects us and that makes us withdraw. Reason number 1, you believe that you are wrong. And that's a core characteristic here of CPTSD. You are wrong, you are the problem, you are the wound. That's typical for someone with complex trauma. And it's also related to a heavy inner critic that you might have here. If you do so, you constantly carry that deep belief that makes you never want to expose your true inner self because you already believe so deep down that no one will like you anyway the way you are. So instead, what you do is you hide specific parts of yourself, you mask them, you suppress specific emotions and needs, and not just as people who have autism, but especially as people who are more sensitive, who have CPTSD. Reason number 2 is you believe that others are wrong. So when you have that, everyone else is also not good. So it's not just about you that you are wrong, also you assume that the others are evil, people in general are devils. And what you do is you don't see people as being on a spectrum. They're good or they are bad people for you. And this is what we call the outer critic here. And I have that belief myself quite often. I truly believe that people not only don't want good for me, but I believe that people sometimes want the worst for me. And that they don't love me, that they don't like me at all. This is what I sometimes believe out of my CPTSD, and this is this kind of outer critic. This belief, I have to tell you, is bullshit. It's a lie that you are telling yourself because you learned that as a hurt child. And I can say that because I experienced that myself. And I know that is bullshit because I met so many people where I assumed they will hurt me. They want the worst for me. But in the end, it came out as false. Those are assumptions that my hurt part of my personality makes, but which are actually not true. You are not that vulnerable child anymore. You are an adult now. And it's also a false assumption that every person you meet is just good or bad. No, everyone is somewhere on a spectrum. Of course, there are psychopaths, yes, but there are also kind and beautiful people. And even those people have their bad sides. Even those people have their flaws. Everyone is somewhere on the spectrum between amazing qualities and horrible flaws. Okay, that's reality. Reason number 3, you believe that you have to fulfill expectations. There's also a big one here because many people who experience early trauma run around through that world and believe that they have to be perfect. They have to be perfect to be loved, to be seen, to be heard. And what they also do is they have really high expectations on themselves. And they also have really expectations about their partners, about their friends, about their parents, for example. So when you have high expectations on others, then you also believe that you have to fulfill high expectations of other people. So what you do then is, as soon as you experience, for example, weaknesses or that you are not perfect, you suppress specific parts again of yourself, and you're not authentic anymore around others because, again, at first you have to be perfect, is what you believe. If you are weak, you're not perfect. And when you have to fulfill expectations of other people, then you also have to be perfect. You also have to fulfill them perfectly, because if not, then the others will hate you or will leave you. So what you don't do is expressing your authentic being, expressing your emotions, your needs, and you don't set clear boundaries as well. And if you want to learn that, I also remember you that we have a free workbook, the Re-Regulation Resources Workbook, where you can start to train exactly that. I'll link that to you in the description below, or you just go to understandable-podcast.com. In this workbook, you can learn to re-regulate your nervous system, you can learn the best writing techniques, and start to understand and communicate your emotions as well. We go on with reason number 4. You are a self or auto-regulator. What does that mean? Are you someone who works out everything with yourself? Then you are an auto-regulator. And that's typical for someone who survived childhood trauma. Because often what happens in toxic family systems of children who were raised there, that parents weren't there, not physically, not emotionally. So they weren't visibly present. You couldn't express your emotions and needs. You couldn't learn to be yourself. You couldn't learn to set boundaries in a healthy way. So you didn't learn to co-regulate with others and while others are present. You were only able to regulate yourself on your own when you were locked in your room behind closed doors. So just in solitude. And that's also typically me, because I always thought, and I have that belief so clear in my mind, I only be safe when I'm on myself. One-man army always wins and is the safest. This is what I told myself so many times when I was young, because I often felt, wow, the whole world is against me. No one understands me. I'm just that weird alien somehow, but I have these needs and emotions. So what can I do? How can I regulate them when I'm alone? This is what many of us learned when we have and talk about CPTSD here. And also, you don't allow others to help you regulating because you didn't learn to trust them. And this is a thing that also comes from pretty early on in your life, but you still do that now as an adult. Now, solitude and withdrawing is therefore your basic strategy to re-regulate yourself, to deal with problems, challenges, emotions, needs, with everything that's quite normal for you as a human being. And this is why you need solitude and isolation so much, right? Sign number 5, people trigger you. I think that's pretty much it. That's a pretty easy description here and such a clear sign for CPTSD. And I have a short story for that. I once asked my therapist this question: how do I know if it's just me loving to be alone or me needing to withdraw because of complex trauma? Because I just love to be on my own. That's what I said. And she asked me back, aren't you seeing me because you're emotionally triggered when other people are around? So the more you are triggered emotionally by others, the more you like to be alone. And these triggers can bring you to flashbacks from your childhood, predominantly emotional flashbacks, anxiety, or they make you feel uncomfortable because you believe that the other person might judge you, might scream at you like your parents did, or he might even beat you up. And you could ask yourself here, how would I behave now if I would be alone in that situation? Or which thoughts wouldn't I have now if I would be alone on my own? Is there a difference? Because If you have the similar amount of thoughts, anxieties, and would behave the same way, and you still just want to be alone, I think then you just like being alone. If you have fewer thoughts alone, and you want to be alone when you have more thoughts when you're with someone, then that's probably because you're triggered here. And reason number 6, you regulate your symptoms, and that's exhausting. Many people with CPTSD don't even know that they're regulating around their symptoms constantly when they're with other people, right? So in the beginning, many people just think, well, I somehow feel bad around other people, I should stay away from them. Then symptoms can be emotional dysregulation, anxiety, dissociation, distorted sense of self, an anxious, chaotic, or avoidant attachment style, hypervigilance, or somatic symptoms like pressure in your chest, in your gut, chronic fatigue, things like these. So what you do is you just don't want to feel these sensations, and you don't want to feel them because it's exhausting to feel them. So you prefer being alone here. Now, if there are a problem with isolation, is that a good or a bad thing? It's neither. If you need to withdraw and isolate yourself, then do so. That's an important strategy for you that makes you feel calm, comfortable, and safe. But if you deep down unconsciously long for intimacy, wish for closeness as well, and safe relationships, then full isolation and solitude might be an unfavorable strategy. And I think when I read through those comments here, I see many people who wish for safe relationships and a calmer and normal, safe life. So the problem with isolation basically is, if you want to ever break free from that, from your symptoms of CPTSD, and stop being alone so much because you somehow feel that it's lonely, that you can't trust other people, and maybe have even stable relationships, then you have to stop isolating. Why is that? Because the more you isolate, the more you isolate. And that is because your brain only learns that isolation is safe until it becomes a new habit. And if you isolate yourself and you're just alone and avoid people now for decades, then you really trained your brain to function in that alone and isolated state. It also affects your neuroception to stimuli from the environment. Neuroception, quite short, is your ability of your nervous system to detect threats and dangers in the environment. It's something that you can't control. It's like you can't control your heartbeat, and you can train it, your neuroception, like a muscle as well. The more you are alone, the more you isolate yourself, the more you train your neuroception towards being super sensitive around other people and stimuli from the environment. So what you do here is you take away the chance for your nervous system to adapt to feel safe around other people. And this is why also slow exposure therapy, for example, is recommended for people with CPTSD to resolve avoidance patterns. And this is what I also did in my therapy as well. Now, exposing ourselves slowly is definitely the first alternative here. I want to talk about some alternatives to isolation and avoidance. So what can we do if we really want to break free from those symptoms and not be alone for the rest of our lives? If we finally want to start to have safe relationships. Now, the first thing, as I said, is that exposing ourselves slowly is definitely a huge thing because it is needed for our neuroception and as well for the adaptation of our whole nervous system to be around other people and to start to trust other people. A goal can be, for many of you who now believe, well, I could never do that, I could never have many friends and safe relationships. I think the goal should be to have few, very few, but high quality relationships with people you can really trust. And if you again experienced in your life that there are no people out there who are trustworthy, that all people are bad. Remember yourself, that's a coping strategy from the past. This is a protection mechanism from the past. It is not completely true. The fact is, it's bullshit. Okay? It's not true that all people are bad. There are really beautiful souls out there, and you have to find them. Also, take responsibility for that. The world is even worse when you just know bad people and when you constantly circle around these thoughts and these beliefs that the world is a bad place and that there is no one out there who you can trust. Take responsibility for these thoughts and beliefs and try to open yourself up. Make yourself vulnerable in slow steps and expose yourself again. So that's the only way how you can heal and how you can find people you could finally trust in and build stable relationships with, because there are so many of them out there. Also, if you learn to open yourself up step by step, you also break free from your role of an autoregulator. You will learn what it takes to find a stable and healthy relationship. You also have to learn the skills for these healthy relationships, that you learn to communicate your emotions, your needs, very important, that you also learn to set boundaries. And we can also do that together, because at the moment I'm building a community platform on School, and the first people who will be signed up will have lifelong access to that for free. And if you want to be one of those first, definitely download the free workbook and leave your email, so I will message you as soon as the community platform is online. Now, as hard and bad and not trustful the world seems sometimes, I personally believe, because I made those experiences in the past years, that there are beautiful places, beautiful people out there which you can feel safe with and where you can feel comfortable with, open yourself up with, and finally find a more fulfilled, calm, and safe life. What do you think about that topic? Do you isolate yourself quite often? Do you want to break free, or will you stay on your own for the next years? Definitely leave me a comment below. And if you want to support this podcast, leave me a review as well on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. And I see and speak to you in the next episode. Have a great day.